Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, 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 broken your vows 1,000 times, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times. So 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 you've broken your vows 1,000 times. Come yet again, come.
Good morning. Welcome to this joint service between the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Midland and the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Central Michigan. Today's service is titled An Ever-Changing Faith, led by Reverend Eric Severson. His pronouns are he, him, his, and he has served the Midland congregation for the past 3 years. I'm Beth Sperry. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm one of your worship associates today.
And we're having a mic problem. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, no.
Okay. I'm Cynthia Damer, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm also a worship associate this morning here in Mount Pleasant.
So cool. Now, respecting one another's personal space, we invite you to briefly say, hello. Good morning. To each other, especially to people you don't see often. And if you'd like to say hello to the Zoom people, both Central Michigan and our people, step over to the camera.
This is good. Yeah, Margaret's supposed to agree with that. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Yeah. Good morning. Yes. You can keep them while we're replacing the batteries. I don't know how this come out so good.
Thank you, Tucker.
Everyone should get a prize today.
Or at least my name's in a
Okay, and we got the mic working now. All right, so I'm gonna ask Jacoby to come up. And I invite our respective congregations and folks at home to light our chalices. And I invite you all to join in reading the opening words today, titled While We're Here, by Reverend Eric Walker Wickstrom. So you can join me. Here today, in this place, and with these people, may we listen so that we can hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we can know. And may we know so that we can change ourselves and this world. May this chalice be light our way.
Thank you, Cynthia. Beth and I will share today Mira and the Big Story by Laura Allery, illustrated by Sue Todd. And we should have, there we are, images. There once was a green valley that lay between two mountains. Through the valley flowed a river. On each bank of the river stood a village. As long as anyone could remember, the people of the two villages had been enemies. Strange as it seems, it all began with a couple of stories. In both villages, the people loved to tell stories. They told stories to amuse themselves, to teach their children, and to help themselves remember important things. Most important of all was the wonderful tales they told about the beginning.
In the beginning, said the people of one village, there was no valley at all, just a flat, rocky plain. When the King of Heaven looked down on the earth and saw people wandering around homeless, he decided to give them a place to live. So he sent enormous birds to gather the rocks and pile them into the mountains. Between the great ridges, the birds scratched and clawed a channel that filled with rainwater and became the river. Finally, one of the birds led the people to their new homeland. And that, declared the villagers, is how our ancestors came to this valley. Now it belongs to us, a gift from the King of Heaven.
In the village across the river, a different story was told. Long ago, said the village folks, the Queen of the Earth searched high and low for the perfect people to make their home in the valley. When she found them at last, she sent giant turtles to carry the new settlers up the river on their backs. And that, declared the villagers, is how our ancestors came to this valley. Now it belongs to us, a gift from the Queen of the Earth.
Day after day, year after year, the people of each village told and sang their own stories until they could no longer imagine the beginning of life in the valley any other way. On opposite sides of the river, when the villagers looked across and saw others celebrating a different story of the beginning, they became angry.
That is not how the story goes, they all complained bitterly. This is our valley. It was a gift to us. We belong here. There's no room for the others.
In a little yellow house in one of the villages lived a girl named Mira. Like all the children in her village, Mira had grown up hearing stories about the beginning. She knew them by heart. She knew the valley belonged to her people. She knew the others were enemies. She knew they did not belong. But she was very curious about them.
On fine afternoons, Mira often climbed a tree close to the river and watched the people in the other village. Once or twice, when she was feeling especially bold, she even walked far down the bank to a place where the river was narrow and shallow and waded across.
On the other side, everything was strangely familiar. The trees, the wildflowers, the songs of the birds and insects, the smell of the wind. It was so much like home. Mira looked across the water toward her own village. It felt strange to see it the way the others did.
On one of these secret visits, Mira was getting ready to cross back over the river when she fell and cut her foot on a rock. She had scarcely sat down when she heard the rustle of leaves. A small boy scrambled down from the tree where he'd been hiding. "Are you hurt?" the boy asked. "Can I help you?" Mira was too surprised to answer. The boy came closer and held out his hand. "Here," he said, "take my arm. Lean on me until you get back across." And together they waded through the water to the other shore.
Who are you?
Mira wanted to know.
Where did you come from?
"Where do you think?" the boy answered with a smile. "Do you suppose you're the only one who's curious about the folk on the other side of the river? I watch you the same way you watch us. But you were the first to cross over. That was brave." He looked at Mira admiringly. "I must go now. I hope we meet again." And away he went.
Mira felt jumbled up inside. For the rest of the day, she wondered about the boy. He seemed like an odd piece in a jigsaw puzzle. He was the wrong shape, and she could not make him fit. The others were not supposed to be kind. The others were not supposed to be curious. The others were not supposed to be like her. Could the stories be wrong? Well, there was only one person to whom Mira could bring such a big question.
Old Alfred lived near the river in a stone cottage filled with books. He was not reading. When he was not reading, he was out working in his garden, growing vegetables and herbs from which he made soups, teas, and medicines for the people of the village. Children were welcome to come and pick his raspberries. Old Alfred always offered them homemade cookies and a glass of lavender lemonade. He was wise and kind, and his mind and heart were as open as his front door. That evening, Mira went to see old Alfred. She found him enjoying a pot of tea in the garden. He welcomed her warmly and offered her a cup. When Mira was settled with her tea and cookie, she took a deep breath and said,
Old Alfred, I need your help. I have a big question, and there is no one else I can ask.
Old Alfred put down his teacup. A big question, you say? I like big questions. It's been a long time since anyone has asked me a good one. Tell me about yours. Mira told Alfred everything, about her secret trips to the other side of the river, about the boy she had met, and how he was like a puzzle piece that did not fit. Old Alfred listened carefully. Then he asked, "So what is your big question?" And in a small voice, Mira said,
Are the stories wrong?
For a moment, old Alfred stared silently up into the night sky. Then he said, "Mira, let me tell you something about stories. Stories can make you bigger, not on the outside, of course, but on the inside. They can stretch your mind and heart. But a story can make you smaller if it takes up all the space in your mind and heart. When new people or new ideas come along, there is no room for them. Whenever you hear a story, you must ask yourself, what is the story doing to me? Is it making me bigger or smaller? Our village is dear to me, Mira, but our minds and hearts need to be stretched so we can make room for others." Old Alfred sighed. "There will never be peace in this valley until the people in both villages find a story big enough for all of them." Mira felt even more mixed up than before.
I don't understand.
She said,
What kind of story could be big enough for everybody?
"I have a story to share," replied old Alfred. "If you would care to hear it,"
I would.
said Mira. So old Alfred began. "In the beginning, there was nothing. Yet there was everything. Do you ever collect chestnuts in the fall, Mira? Imagine holding a chestnut in the palm of your hand. Now imagine something even smaller than that little nut, containing everything that ever existed. It was there, but it was not there. The way a bright sunflower is not inside the striped seed, the way a song is and is not inside the wooden shell of a violin. Then there was light, not ordinary light, but the light of stars or candles, not like the light of stars or candles or winter bonfire. This was pure energy. Out of it came unimaginably small bits of matter, the first stuff. Some matter came together and formed stars. Over ages and ages, the stars burned, vast furnaces forging new things deep in their hearts. When the time came for them to die, the stars exploded. All the stuff inside them was scattered into space. It drifted like dandelion seeds on the wind, ready to start something new. From that stardust came everything: clouds and comets, whales and wildebeests, rattlesnakes and redwood trees.
Emus and elephants?
Yes.
Dinosaurs and dragonflies?
Yes. Pussy willows and plesiosaurs, seahorses and stars. From that stardust came galaxies and solar systems and a little blue planet called Earth. From all that stardust came the mountains and the valley and the river and 2 villages. From that stardust came an old man and his garden, and a girl named Mira, and a boy who is still a stranger. We all come from the same place, and we're all made of the same stuff. We are neighbors on this little planet of ours, sailing through the cosmos. Mira felt like her mind and heart were so full they would burst.
If this story is true,
She cried.
then no one owns the valley and we all belong here. If this story is true, the people across the river are not others. They are like us. If this story is true, we are all connected to each other and to everything else. The river, the trees, the sky, the ocean, the animals. If this story is true, we have wasted too much time being enemies.
And Mira began to cry. Old Alfred said gently, Mira, tell me what is in your heart.
What about the stories?
Mira sobbed.
What about the birds who led us to the valley? What about the King of Heaven? And what about our gift?
Dear child, answered old Alfred, you asked me a big question. Now I will ask you some. Who dreamed everything when there was nothing? Whose hand held that little chestnut? Who first lit the stars? Who opened the heart of that little boy to be kind to his enemy? Who opened your mind to see him as someone like you? Who made you so wonderfully curious? Mira, you have not lost your gift or the one who gave it. Both are just so much greater than you ever dreamed. Old Alfred handed Mira a large handkerchief to dry her tears. When she was calm, he asked, so, my dear, what do you think of this story? What does it do to you? Mira pictured the face of the boy across the river. She wanted to find him again and learn his name. Maybe they would become friends. Maybe other children would cross the river. Maybe some grown-ups would come. Mira felt bigger inside.
I like your story.
She replied with a moonlit smile.
I think it is big enough for everyone.
Well then, said old Alfred, perhaps you can share the story with someone else.
I will.
Promised Mira, getting up from her chair.
I already know where to start.
I thought you might. Old Alfred smiled. Now get yourself home to bed,
But, old Alfred,
answered Mira, stretching out her arms to take in the whole valley and the sky above.
I already am home.
Then Mira headed out into the starry night. Now let's end our time for all ages in song together with your masks on, please. Now is the time our children usually head to their activities. These words are set to the doxology.
We hold you in our hearts with love.
skies above, a love as deep as seas below. We love you more than words can show.
Again, welcome everyone. Whether you ambled in, walked in briskly, wheeled in, or signed in online, we appreciate you spending some of your Sunday morning with us.
Unitarian Universalism is a welcoming and inclusive religion. It encourages us to keep open hearts and minds because our own experience, conscience, and reason are the final authorities in religion. It affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every person and that we are all connected to each other and the earth.
We extend a special welcome to any visitors today. If you have any questions, please let us know. And we invite you to sign our guest book before you leave so that we may stay connected.
For those joining us online from home, please type into the chat box who you are and who you have brought with you today. We will be recording this service, but personal sharing will be edited out. For those taking part in person, please silence your phones, and masks are recommended and required if you'd like to join in singing.
If you would like to become a member of either fellowship, please contact your respective minister or office administrator, or let us know of your interest in person in the chat box or on the visitor sign-in sheet. So here in Midland, our announcements today are these. Join us next week for another joint service led by Reverend Andrew Franz via Zoom for us. Then stay for an ice cream social and committee and team fair to learn about the many ways we care for each other. If you are not a member and would like to be or are thinking about it, please sign up for an orientation session either Sunday, February 12th or Sunday, February 26th, and see Reverend Eric for more information. Important votes will be taken at the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly in Pittsburgh this June. If you would like to represent the fellowship as an official delegate, or you have questions, please contact a member of the board or Reverend Eric. Cynthia?
All right, and in Mount Pleasant, I have one announcement, and that is in 2 weeks, from today, the RE youth will be making pizzas during RE time, and then they invite everyone to join them for a pizza party after service.
So, please see your newsletter, Facebook page, and fellowship websites for all the latest news, upcoming events, and sign-up links.
I invite you to center yourselves as members of the Midland Choir, come together and share the song Woyaya by Loti Amoa, Solomon Amarfio, Robert M. Bailey, Roy Bedeau, Francis T. Osei, Wendell K. Richardson, and Mac Tanto, transcribed from Issei M. Barnwell, arranged by Jeannie Gagne. The choir is directed by Andrew Schultz and accompanied by Melanie Willison.
We are no
Thank you to our choir. To represent all those joys and sorrows we may be feeling but have not expressed today, I ask that you hold all of these joys and sorrows, spoken and unspoken, in your hearts. Thank you. I share with you today a pastoral response titled "This Body" by the Reverend Kayla Parker. This body is not what it was. I got shin splints from running today. 10 years ago, all I get was smelly feet. My back aches just from sitting these days. In my youth, all my pain came from climbing trees. This body is not what it was. Not some alien thing thrust upon me, so clumsy, always in the way. I know it and move it like it's mine. Didn't say I never walk into walls from time to time. This body is not what it will be. When the sagging of old age sets in and simple backaches are fond memories. So I'll take and enjoy what it is now. Not yet frail from old age, but sometimes awkward and weak. Really, it suits what's inside quite nicely. This body is not what it was or what it will be. And thankfully, right now, it seems to just fit me.
This is a reading entitled A History of Church, Including Yours, by Reverend Sean Neil Barron. One day, your church was born.
Maybe it was a gathering of saints, called together for the common worship of a wrathful God, ceaselessly praying between bouts of decrying the evil of Christmas or dancing.
Or maybe a few brave souls answered a notice in the newspaper, curiosity piqued by the announcement of a religion where free thinking and tolerance were bedrocks.
No matter how it happened, your church was born, a gathering of people, humble, caring, anxious, and quirky all at the same time, who coveted to be with one another on the journey of life, death, and everything in between.
And so it began. A faithful few, beautifully imperfect, called to that central task, the human task of connecting, loving, and serving.
It was just a baby, and yet it was thrust deep into the human condition, tasked to hold minds and souls, bodies and hearts along the roller derby of disease and birth, infighting and joy, and Christmas pageants. Sometimes all of those at the same time.
They gathered to hear the world broken open, for insightful sermons, rejuvenating music, and a community whose fierce devotion to each other's well-being rivaled a mama bear's for her cubs.
But it wasn't always like that, of course. There were the trying times. And I don't just mean Phyllis or Jack, those stubborn but lovable souls who inhabit the netherworld of committee meetings. No, I mean the trying times.
When the church almost split in half over the war or integration, or when the mill left the town vacant, or when the minister crossed that line and the people couldn't speak about it for decades.
But somehow you were still here, still in the town common, still the church that everyone recognizes, still the ones that showed up every time you were called on, still using the communion silver until you voted to sell it.
New people came, and they changed things. Small things, big things. Things that nobody noticed as it happened until suddenly it was hard to even recognize anything anymore. That was a hard moment, a tearful moment.
And other things changed too. The proclamations about God, once heard loud from the pulpit, softened. Wrathful became loving. Distant became intimate. Mandatory became optional.
After the war, the nursery and RE classrooms were overflowing. Each baby dedicated reminded the church of the incredible beauty of life and the gift that this community, all huddled around baby, would bestow upon this child.
The history of your church is more a story of the determination of love to break forth than it is about tie-dye or chalices, sermon discussions, or social justice committee meetings.
The history of the church is the history of human enterprise, evolving in its sights and sounds, yet revolving always around its core.
The history of your church is the gift of potential and momentum, of baggage and personality. The history of your church is the launch pad from which you spring into action or disarray.
Each day, your church is born.
Thank you, Cynthia and Beth. As each of our congregations does periodically, the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations is in the process of revising its bylaws. Who doesn't love bylaws? Included in these bylaws is Article 2, in which our beloved 7 principles and 6 sources were set forth in 1984 and 85. When Reverend Drew and I came to realize how changing these bylaws might affect our people, He proposed a collaboration between our congregations. Together, we've planned this and the next two Sunday services to help us all come to a clearer understanding of the process and prepare for potential changes. My task today is to give these latest changes some context. I have joked with my congregants in the past few weeks that I would have to condense 2,000 years of history into a 15-minute homily. On further reflection, it became obvious that this was a fool's errand. If you are interested in Unitarian Universalist history, there are oodles of resources available, mountains of books, videos, and websites to give you all the details. One such resource is Long Strange Trip, a set of 6 one-hour DVDs detailing the history, quote, of Unitarian Universalist thought from the beginning of the Christian era to what we know today as Unitarian Universalism. I can't get 6 hours into a 15-minute homily. So here are extremely broad strokes of some of the highlights of the story of Unitarian Universalism's evolution. Bear with me. Unitarian Universalism began as two separate theological ideas, both in reaction to Christian dogma. One response was rejection of original sin and adoption of universal salvation. And the other was a rejection of the Trinity, instead affirming the unity, the unified nature of the divine. As early as the 2nd century of the Common Era, the Greek Christian scholar Origen first articulated that universal salvation for one's sins was possible. 4 centuries after his death, he was condemned as a heretic, and many of his writings were destroyed. At the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century, a popular priest in Alexandria, Egypt, named Arius, challenged the idea of the Trinity. He argued that the Christian God is instead a unity, that the divinity of the Son, Jesus, was less than that of the Father, because God had been around forever and Jesus just came on the scene. Arius was excommunicated and also condemned as a heretic. And so it went for centuries. Fast forward to the 16th and 17th centuries. With the Protestant Reformation, a small Unitarian tradition began growing in Europe. One of our best-known martyrs was Spanish physician Michael Servetus. Fearing for his life and running from the Inquisition, he changed his name and fled to France. He was caught, imprisoned, escaped, was caught again, and finally was executed in Geneva by order of John Calvin for his public critiques of Orthodox Trinitarianism. Several other luminary heretics carried the ideas of Universalism and Unitarianism forward. Transylvania became a haven for many of these folks and resulted in the only Unitarian king in history, King John Sigismund. He is known for his Edict of Torda, a statement of religious tolerance that granted freedom to Lutherans, Calvinists, Catholics, and Unitarians to all practice their faiths in his kingdom. Centuries later, in the wake of European colonial expansion, Unitarianism and Universalism moved westward. In what would become the United States, Congregationalists introduced, through the Cambridge Platform, the novel idea that congregations could independently govern themselves. And through the Salem Covenant, the promises they would make to one another in doing so, and to God. In the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, a list of luminary thinkers too long to share continued challenging Unitarian Christian doctrines. Among them were William Ellery Channing, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Theodore Parker. Transcendentalists like Emerson chose not Scripture or even God as the source of revelation, but nature itself. Emerson argued that every person has equal access to the divine. Mainstream clergy didn't much like that idea. Theodore Parker argued that the Bible was full of contradictions and errors, that its miracles were myths, and that society needed radical change, reform. He wrote that many Christian doctrines were transient, subject to change, but that the words and teachings of Jesus were permanent. And he argued that they were true not by Jesus' authority, but simply because they were true. Many Unitarians and Universalists of this period were strongly abolitionist, and many others were not. It is about this time that Unitarian and Universalist women began being listened to and respected, including Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, Julia Ward Howe, Olympia Brown, and again, the list goes on and on. They, of course, challenged the patriarchy within our movements and in society. The Humanist Manifesto of 1933 brought that strand of thinking into the mix. Many other Unitarians and Universalists brought us to this modern era. The American Unitarian Society was founded in 1825. In 1866, the Universalist General Convention was formed, and it became the Universalist Church of America in 1942. The two denominations gradually found common ground, a lot of common ground, and they merged into the Unitarian Universalist Association in 1961. The UUA's principles and purposes have been scrutinized, discussed, and amended ever since before the merger, and right up to when they were codified in 84 and 85, and even to this day. As our awareness of injustices has increased, proposed and actual changes have centered on issues of gender and racial and theological equity, inclusion, and representation. UUA President Reverend Susan Frederick Gray sent just 3 days ago an even clearer description of this history and the need for further changes. It is posted to uua.org for anyone interested in reading it. Unitarian Universalism and the terms we use to describe ourselves have continued to evolve as we have recognized new truths. So let me ask you, what changes have we seen in the world since 1985? Cell phones. The internet. What else? Fox News. COVID. Donald Trump. The Berlin Wall came down. The dissolution of the Soviet Union. LGBTQ rights. Climate change became recognized. Civil and international conflicts around the world, the Persian Gulf, Rwanda, Somalia, Iraq, Bosnia, it just goes on and on. Did you have contributions on the other side? All right. silicone breast implants and their associated problems, the availability of the artificial heart, the launch of the International Space Station. So in what we call a living tradition, why would we think that a set of principles we adopted almost 4 decades ago to help define this tradition would remain immutable? Like technological change, from the gramophone to vinyl records to cassette tapes to 8-track tapes to compact discs to live streaming. Like technology, Unitarian Universalism too has evolved. But the UUA bylaws and the terms we use to describe our identity simply haven't kept up. There was a time when it would have been scandalous for us to associate with a 13th century Persian Sufi poet. Today we affirm that all the world's religions hold a measure of truth. We often quote in word and in song Jalal al-Din Muhammad Rumi in welcoming people to our congregations on Sunday. Come whoever you are. We declare our caravan too is not one of despair. Unitarian Universalism has good news to share, and the love at its center literally has saved lives. We come from a long line of heretics. Woohoo! People willing to challenge the status quo, to question the prevailing thoughts and assumptions of their time. We have adapted. Our access to spiritual practices and sources of meaning has expanded. As Reverend Sean Neil Barron described in our reading, once upon a time our church was born. A gathering of people, humble, caring, anxious, and quirky all at the same time, who covenanted to be with one another on the journey of life, death, and everything in between. Beautifully imperfect, called to that central human task of connecting, loving, and serving. There were times of insight and rejuvenation, and a community of fierce devotion to each other's well-being. And there were times of trouble and turbulence, of divisive and traumatic things that people wouldn't talk about for years. New people came, and they changed things. Some things big, some things small, things that nobody noticed as it happened until suddenly it was hard to even recognize anything anymore. That was a hard moment and a tearful moment. And other things changed too. The proclamations of God. Why am I going like this? The proclamations of God, once heard loud from the pulpit, softened. Wrathful became loving, distant became intimate, mandatory became optional. The community came to understand itself differently. The history of your church is more a story of the determination of love to break forth than it is about tie-dye or chalices, sermon discussions, or social justice committee meetings. There's your permanence and transience right there. The history of your church is the gift of potential and momentum, of baggage and personality. The history of your church is the launch pad from which you spring into action or disarray. Each day, your church is born. Every day, our church is born. Our congregations, our containers of faith, our movement, our understandings of what it means to commit ourselves to love and to justice are ever and ever reborn. I chose Reverend Kayla Parker's prayer for today, not because my body or yours is deteriorating on the daily. I chose it for its metaphorical value. This congregation, the Mount Pleasant congregation, Unitarian Universalism itself, this body is not what it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago, even 5 years ago. And this body today is not what it will become in the next 5, 50, or 100 years. This body has always evolved and will continue to do so. Reverend Drew will touch next week on the sense of loss that can come with such change. By way of consolation, I chose today's story. After a period of discovery and reflection and revelation, Mira seeks wisdom to help her cope with her struggles. She mourns her losses, and old Alfred is there to console her. He then offers her another creation story, a wider perspective. Then he says, Mira, you have not lost your gift or the one who gave it to you. And she replies, I liked your story. I think it is big enough for everyone. And so we are called by the work of the Article 2 Commission to continue the line of succession of those who question the status quo and prevailing thoughts and assumptions of our time. To consider a wider view, to represent ourselves as a Unitarian Universalism even more welcoming and committed to our own transformation than ever before. The Ghanaian word woyaya means we are going. And so we are. Heaven knows where, heaven knows how. We know it'll be hard, muddy and rough, but we'll get there. This is a matter of faith and determination. We are going. Woyaya. In days, weeks, and months to come, may we listen, hear, feel, and know so that we can change ourselves and this world. May it be so, and amen.
In accordance with our values and the stirrings of our hearts, we now invite you to support our fellowship's missions with your donations.
The ushers will pass the plates or baskets among you.
If you wish to pay toward your pledge with cash or check, envelopes are available at the back.
We appreciate and accept your donations gratefully. Thank you.
Today's offertory music is Partita 1 from Partita an Gott, du frommer Gott, O God, thou holy God, by Johann Sebastian Bach, and From You I Receive, with words and music by Joseph and Nathan Siegel, arranged and played today by Melanie Willison. So we invite you now to rise in body or spirit and join in singing with your masks our closing hymn, number 368 in the gray hymnal. Now let us sing, by that famous composer, Anonymous.
Those of you not familiar with this song, there are two parts, the lower voice and the upper voice. The lower voice begins, now let us sing, 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 now let us sing, 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 lift up your voice, be not afraid, now let us sing to the power of the hope within. Faith within, I think is the first word. And the upper part goes,
oh, now let us sing, sing to the power of the faith within. Sing to the power of the faith within. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of the faith within.
and so the words go faith, hope, love, joy. Right? Faith, hope, love, joy. Let's begin.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the hope
Sing.
within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the hope
Sing.
within.
Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the hope within. Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the love within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the love within.
Lift up your
Lift up your
voice, be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the love within. Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the joy within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the joy within.
Lift up your voice, be not afraid.
Be not afraid.
Now let us sing to the power of the joy within.
Oh, I guess it's you, isn't it?
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you to all who made this service possible today, and thank you for joining us.
For our closing words, we will enjoy an excerpt of the song Kiss the Rain by Uroma, shared by Melanie. We will then have breakout rooms online, and we invite our in-person members and guests to stay for refreshments and further conversation.
Our first set of closing words are these, titled, "The Purpose of This Community is to Help Its People Grow," by Reverend Eric Walker Wickstrom. If you are who you were, and if the person next to you is who he or she was, if none of us has changed since the day we came in here, we have failed. The purpose of this community, of any church, temple, zendo, mosque, is to help its people grow. We do this through encounters with the unknown, in ourselves, in one another, in the other, whoever that might be for us, however hard that might be, because these encounters have many gifts to offer. So may you go forth from here this morning, not who you were, but who you could be. And so may we all.
We will extinguish our chalice with these words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Thank you. Melanie will close with a postlude titled "Kiss the Rain" by Uroma. Thank you to everyone